So, lived experience, is this just another label? And if it is, how does it help, support, or hinder those that have been labelled with it? So, for me to start with, lived experience, it's kind of a strange phenomenon, and how it's been sort of labelled, because lived experience to me is any experience that you've lived through. So just specifically having that to being in or part of the justice system or being in custody seems a bit strange in itself, because we all have lived experience. It just depends what that lived experience has been in. I've got lived experience as a father, as a teacher, as a lecturer, as a manager, as a leader. So lived experience in terms of specifically the justice system is a bit of a strange concept to me anyway. Next slide, Carla, please. So the plan of action for today is to understand what the term lived experience is, to discuss if it is just another label, and your input on this, it will be, of great importance. What are your thoughts and feelings on it? Does it help people back into employment? Is it just a label? Is it used to discriminate against people? What are your thoughts? You're working with people on a day-to-day basis who have been given this label or have this label attached to them. What's the feedback from them? And also to be aware of some of the barriers that face people who do have this lived experience of the justice system. And for those of you that have seen the talks before, I do try to get you to commit to one change in practice or one new practice. So from everything that we discuss, is there one particular element of your practice that you're going to change based on the outcome of these talks? Is there something new that you're going to adapt? Is there something you're going to change? Is there something you're going to reintegrate? So please, if you have got anything, please pop that in the chat. Next slide, Carla, please. So, is lived experience, just another label? When looking at lived experience, I'm seeing at the moment, particularly with some of the GIFI jobs, people actively advertising for lived experience. And for me and my experience of the justice system, there are some real untapped individuals that lie within the justice system. There are some very skilled individuals. There are some people that have a hell of a lot to offer, and that's, that might be part of the justice system and the custodial part of that, in terms of, prisons run on a day-to-day basis with those that are in custody doing some of the most important jobs in there. They work in the kitchens, they serve the food, they clean the wings. In some prisons, they have initiatives where they're peer mentors, they're listeners, they do Shannon's Trust, they write CVs, they do disclosure letters, they arrange for people to attend certain classes. There's lots of things that people do within the justice system. And when they come out then, having had or got this lived experience, it's kind of what's out there for people. Now, my generation, it was almost, if you'd been to prison, my parents in particular, your life was almost wrote off. Whereas, things have changed a hell of a lot now. Society is different. So people with lived experience are being actively resourced for jobs. People with lived experience are, being used to help improve the justice system, help improve some of the systems within that, help improve the strategic planning, which is great, because that experience can help. And, when people have got opinions on, how is it best to move forward in education? Well, everyone in England has been through the education system. So opinions on the education system and how it works, if you've worked in it, you've been through it, you've got experience of that system. Likewise, in the NHS, how do we improve the NHS? Well, ask the people who have been through the system. The majority of us at some point in our lives will have been through the national health system. We'll know how it works. We'll be able to give feedback. So it makes sense for the justice system and companies and services in and around that system to use the experience of people that have been in the system in order to improve that system. And that makes perfect sense. And projects like this project, the EPOP project, we have experiential advisors. So we have a team of staff that have been through the justice system who are on hand to help, to support, to offer their experience, to look at strategy, to look at how we can deliver things. And that experience is really important. But I do, and I would like to reiterate that there is some fantastic experience within the system. There are some fantastic people, and they've got some skills to offer both within that system and once they are released into the community. So there are lots of employers now that are willing to give second chances and third chances. Lots of employers have social value teams as well. So specifically those that are going for government funding, if you can access people from hard to reach areas, and by that I mean NEETs, so those not in education, employment or training, those that have been part of the justice system, those that are in hard to reach groups, the social value that comes with that, and particularly those contracts, is something that's, you know, worthwhile for those that have obtained the contract and people who are coming out of the system with that lived experience. Next slide, Carla, please. There are lots of labels that fly around in and around prison. We live in a very judgmental society. Some of them, I'm not going to go through them all, are listed there. Some of them are very, very negative. I think lived experience is probably one of the more positive labels that can be attached to people. But people who have been through the justice system are labelled in a number of ways, dependent upon their conviction, dependent upon how they look, how they act. I think lived experience, if we are looking at it as a label, can be viewed as a positive label in terms of the language being used. But it's about what's being done with that label. Is it helping people move forward? Is it hindering people? And you guys will work with people on a day-to-day basis that have this label, and you will have information on how they feel. In some instances, it may be used as kind of positive discrimination if people are specifically after somebody with lived experience. For me, along with that lived experience comes a number of transferable skills. You've got to be very resilient in order to get through the justice system. I think we'll all agree that it's probably not where it should be at the moment. You know, there's issues with staffing, there's issues with overcrowding, there's issues with education in there. There's, you know, there are numerous issues, and for people to actually go into custody, to serve their sentence, to get through that sentence, to, you know, face and deal with having your liberty taken away, being away from your family, and to get through that system requires great resilience. There are people in there that are very creative. There are people in there that are hardworking. And there are people in there with really good skill sets that they've had prior to going in. There are numerous people I've met on my journey that have made one mistake. They've spent 45, 50 years as a father, as a plumber, as an electrician, as a business owner. They've made one mistake, stupid mistake. They've made a bad decision. They've done something ridiculous, and they've ended up for a short period of time serving a sentence. And then all of a sudden they're labelled as, you know, lived experience is probably one of the nicer labels, but they're labelled as a, I don't know, a drug dealer. They're labelled as a fraudster, whatever it may be. So it's just kind of highlighting that, you know, there are people in the justice system with a really good skill set. There are people in there that are creative. There are people in there that are resilient. There are people in there that have realized their mistakes and want to move on. There are people in there that are positive. There are people in there that want others to learn from their mistakes. And, you know, some of the most successful initiatives within the justice system are prisoner-led. The Shannon's Trust, for example, for those of you that are not aware, the Shannon's Trust is an initiative that helps inmates help other inmates to read and write. The Listeners, which is run by the Samaritans, is an initiative where inmates help other inmates that are in crisis. There are other initiatives to do with employment, a company that I'm aware of called Inside Job. So what they do is they employ people within the justice system who are serving their own sentence as peer recruiters. So what they would then do is work with others who are due for release on what their career plans are for when they're released. So, you know, they'll do a CV with them, they'll do a disclosure letter with them, they'll look at, you know, what it is or where they want to get to when they're released, what types of employment they're able to access, what qualifications they'll need to do. So there are some fantastic initiatives that are led by people who are currently in custody. Next slide, Carla, please. And again, everyone has their own thoughts, but for me, the justice system should be about habilitation or rehabilitation, however you wish to look at it. It should be about people coming to terms with and accepting mistakes that have been made and finding a way of moving forward. And this is where you guys have such a powerful and rewarding job, in the fact that you can be the facilitator to allowing people to go on and do fantastic things and achieve things that they never thought were possible. And the reason that's possible is due to information and guidance from yourselves, pointing people in the right direction, signposting other services, helping with employment, building confidence, all that kind of thing can help somebody along their way. And everyone starts their journey at different paths. Everyone's endpoint is different. But ultimately, those with lived experience, you know, they've got to live the rest of their lives. They've got to experience the rest of their lives. And to be able to move forward and to be shown a better way or guided in a better way comes primarily from you guys who are working within the probation service and within the justice service. Next slide, Carla, please. So ultimately, when individuals are released, and you'll be fully aware of this, there are a number of barriers and problems that will occur on the way. In custody, life on the outside can't get to you. You're taken away from family, from friends, from, you know, real life as such. If you have debt issues or you've got issues on the outside, that can't kind of face you inside. The only things that you deal with inside are any addictions and problems with your own personality or your own issues or your own mental health. So on release, there can be numerous barriers, and ultimately our aim and goal is to support people back into society, into community. And one of the best ways of doing that is through employment. But employment is difficult, or can be difficult, when you have lived experience. And that label that's attached to you from that lived experience can be difficult in some instances in order to move on with your life. Next slide, Carla, please. So in terms of when is an individual rehabilitated, whose decision is that? What does it even mean? When are they ready to be released in society? Well, once they've served their time, they may have a HDC, there may be a tag, but, you know, they're considered eligible for release. Once they're released then into society, there are a number of parameters that they'll need to stick to. within those parameters, at what point do you see somebody being rehabilitated? When are they ready to put the past behind them, move on with the rest of their life? For some people, it may, they may still have addiction to deal with. For some people, they may have a family crisis to deal with. For some people, they may have curfew issues to deal with. For some people, they may just need and want to get back into employment. And as I said earlier, the beauty of this day and age is the fact that people are willing to give people a second chance. And there are lots of companies out there that will hire people who have lived experience. They will not use it negatively. They'll use it in a positive manner. There are some companies out there that, although the HR department will need to know exactly what the conviction is and all the details around it, but some of the hiring managers don't actually want to know what the conviction is. They just want to judge people based on how they are at work. They don't actually want to know, which is fantastic. And I think, the opportunities for people now that have got lived experience, particularly coming back into society, particularly trying to get back into work, there are lots of companies that genuinely believe in the value that you get from hiring somebody with lived experience. I think some of the statistics around it show that they're loyal, they're resilient, they're strong, they're creative, they can work well as part of a team. And in a lot of instances, it's just a risk assessment that needs to take place, and people can get back to earning a living, to being a positive example for their children, for other members of society, to play a part. But with a lot of people, that giving something back and allowing people to learn from their experiences is something that they're really passionate about. And the people like St Giles and the Wise Group and these projects allow people that have made a mistake to give a little bit back and to encourage people who may be on the verge of doing something daft not to, and for people to learn from their mistakes. Next slide, Carla, please. So there are numerous factors in reducing reoffending, but I think one of the most important is employment or education, because education and employment makes things possible. Having the option, having been or having served a custodial sentence, to go back out into employment, to know that people are going to give you a second chance, to know that you can reshape your life and your career, it is fantastic. And for a lot of people, that is the biggest factor in reducing that reoffending, in changing a pattern of behaviour, in wanting to do something different. And education and employment allow that. If you've got somebody that's only ever done entry-level jobs, they've only ever been on minimum wage, they've only ever been on 0 hours contracts, in some instances they may not have been shown a better way, they may not believe it possible. But through education, through opportunities, through employment, that can all change very quickly. I'd like to see the justice system as well make better use of people's time in custody. There are lots of people on remand at the moment that aren't able to access any kind of training or education within the system. There are lots of people that are serving short sentences that don't really get enough time to be able to re-educate themselves, to be able to learn something new, to be able to pick up a trade. And I think, in terms of employment and in terms of moving on and using lived experience as a positive as opposed to a negative, people need educating, people need the opportunity, and people need a chance to move forward. And I think the system as it stands at the moment has got considerable work to do in order to achieve that. Next slide, Carla, please. So in relation to what we have discussed, in relation to everything that we've just gone through, is there anything, or is there one change in your practice that you will make based on the information we have? I'd like to get some opinions with regards to, you know, lived experience from people, how they're dealing with candidates who may be struggling. Has anyone got any thoughts? Has anyone got any questions? Is there anything that you're going to change about your practice?